Welcome to Like Maria, and today we're going to look at a poem by Duhig. It's called The Lammas Hireling. In order to do this, we're going to focus on an essay, the title of which will be Discuss the Presentation of Guilt in Duhig's Lammas Hireling. So by the end of this video, you should know how to solve a problem like an essay on the Lammas Hireling. So I'm going to focus today on 5 ways that guilt is explored in this poem. We're going to look at it being a dramatic monologue. We're going to look at its setting, the imagery surrounding the dream that the farmer experiences, the folklore element, and then the Gothic element here. Now, before we start, I should just clarify what's happening in this poem, because it is quite a difficult one. So it's called The Lammas Hireling. It's about a farmer who goes to a fair and hires a hireling. A hireling is someone that works on the land, and the farmers used to go along to a fair, to a big meeting of other farmers, and people who wanted a job would be there and they would hire them. So that's the hireling bit of the title. The Lammas bit is referring to Lammas Tide, which was the harvest season. So instead of being the Christmas hireling or the Easter hireling, this guy is the Lammas hireling because he was hired at Lammas Tide. And this is important in the poem because Lammas Tide is the time when you bring in the harvest and you celebrate the harvest. But for this particular farmer, the harvest goes wrong really in his harvesting of the hireling. So he brings this hireling home, sets him to work on the land. Everything goes well until one night he discovers that actually this young lad isn't all that he seemed to be. He is in fact a rather sinister warlock who changes into a hare in the middle of the night. And the farmer can't cope with this because he knows it's sort of bad stuff happening, and he goes out in the middle of the night and shoots the hare, and he throws him into the river to get rid of him. Because of this murder of the Lammas hireling, who had turned into a hare, the farmer has a great deal of guilt in his life, and he basically spends his days confessing his sin of murder to the priest. So, first off, we're going to talk about the form of this poem, which is a dramatic monologue. Dramatic monologue is when we hear the first person voice in a poem as if they are talking to another person. In this case, the first person voice is a farmer talking to a priest to whom he is confessing. So straight away, the intimacy of this form of poetry, dramatic monologue, shows that the farmer has a great deal of guilt because he is confiding in the priest, in another person. He is confessing. So this is a situation where he is telling his story that brought him into a place where he would carry guilt. So the dramatic monologue is a form where often people confess. You might want to look up a very famous dramatic monologue, My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, where again there is a sense of guilt and confession, although the guy in the Browning poem isn't too bothered that he's guilty. Secondly, the setting is important here. It is revealed at the end of the poem when the farmer says that he spends his days here. It is revealed that he is in a church confessing to a priest, probably in a confessional, a little box. I'm sure you've seen this on many films where a Catholic person goes in and confesses crime to the Catholic priest. There's a lot of secrecy surrounding this process, and the ritualistic words from the confession are presented here in the poem. Bless me, Father, is the traditional formulaic start off to a confession. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. That is the formula. And here it's notable that the farmer starts confessing at the end of the poem. And this indicates that he is constantly confessing. He's told his story and he's about to start again. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. And then he's going to return to the first line of the poem and talk about his light heart again and going to the fair again. So there is a circularity to the process in this narrative, in the structure of the poem, and this shows his guilt to be very heavy, very deep, because it keeps circulating around. He can't shake off the guilt, no matter how often he confesses or spends his day here in the confessional. Another reference to his guilt in this poem is the fact that he cannot dream anymore. In fact, he doesn't sleep anymore. At the start of the poem, he was asleep and he was woken by screaming. He says he was dreaming of his dead wife, which is another sinister aspect of this poem. But in the last stanza, he doesn't dream anymore. Now, this ability to sleep and dream suggests that he is tormented by thoughts of the murder and the sin that is weighing heavily on his soul. Another way that his guilt is expressed is that he searches for some kind of reason why he might have done this, and he presents this to the priest in the words, "To go into the hair gets you muckle sorrow, muckle care." He says the wisdom runs this way. The wisdom runs means the saying goes. To go into the hair gets you muckle sorrow, muckle care. So the rhythm of this and the repetition of muckle, the use of that dialect word muckle, and quoting folklore wisdom here, shows that there is some way he's trying to justify the problem that he has got himself into. He says, folklore says that if you hire someone who changes into a hare, you will get muckle sorrow, muckle care. Therefore, I killed him because I didn't want muckle sorrow, muckle care. But actually in this poem, it turns out that things go badly wrong for him, and his harvest fails. The cows don't give milk anymore when he has shot the hare. So the reverse of the folklore happens to him. But the fact that he's quoting the folklore suggests that he needs something to justify his actions. The last thing I think it would be important to talk about, again returning a little bit to setting, is the Gothic element of this poem. So if we're talking about guilt and bad deeds happening, if we trace the light through this poem, we see that at the beginning he starts with a light heart. But then when he commits this sin, this murder, the moon came out, and there is a dark lantern involved in his journeying out to find the boy, and the moon gives yellow witness. So the change in the light from a light heart to the more sinister moon coming out, which we know is an element of Gothic description, always the moon being witness to bad deeds, enhances the illustration of this man's story, and enhances our sense that he's doing something wrong, he's trespassing, and therefore should be guilty and should carry this guilt. So you can see from these 5 points that we can work up a very complex presentation of guilt by Duhig, looking at the form, looking at the setting, and looking at the Gothic imagery. So hopefully that's given you some ideas on how to solve a problem like the Lammas Hireling.